On today's show, what does a year 3 leap look like for Jabari Smith Jr.? What is Jabari's ideal role on this Houston Rockets roster, and what do we need to see from him next? It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, that's right, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Here to talk all things Jabari Smith Jr. as we're heading into the all-important year 3 of Jabari's career. And Madison, we look back at, first couple years of Jabari's career. Obviously, that first year under, the final year of the Steven Silas era. God, I don't want to have to bring back PTSD or nightmares or anything from all that. But right, it was a bad rookie year, right? You take Jabari's own words for it, right? He was like, we had a bad year, lost a bunch of games, all that stuff. And then he had a massive improvement in year 2, the first year under new head coach Ime Udoka, the first year with the Rockets having structure and an identity, and they were actually playing for something, playing in meaningful basketball games. And we saw a version of Jabari Smith Jr. that was much closer to the version that we thought we were getting when the Rockets first drafted him number 3 overall. This past season, he averaged just under 14 points per contest, a little over 8 rebounds, and managed to shoot just over 36% from downtown. So numbers that aren't, quite, like star-studded numbers, or aren't quite super jumping off the page yet, but he's trending in the right direction after what was, a bad rookie season and then, a really promising second-year campaign.
Yeah, no, I was really excited for Jabari's year. Like we all said or all noticed, that his rookie season was a bit disappointing, especially for the role that he was given. It was supposed to be a role that he could step in and right away contribute in, and he wasn't efficient enough. He just was a step behind, and that is normal for rookies. Not all rookies are ready to play, and Jabari was an extremely young rookie, still filling into his body to this day. So a lot of the physicality was a lot too much for him. Routine, the distance of the three-point shooter. He was marketed as this marksman coming in, one of the best big man shooters we've seen in the draft in a while, and he struggled from beyond the arc, right? And so he struggled to do a lot of the release valve role and option he had, and he didn't hit the ground running defensively either, which he was branded to be this incredible defender coming out. But we've seen very much, I'd say, a leap into a starting level player in his second year, which was very encouraging. When we have these young players, we like to see development, and we like to see guys get better in their roles. And that is exactly what Jabari Smith did. I thought he actually had an excellent year this year. You can tell that he worked on his craft. He became more of a professional. And even when the year started off, there were still some, rotational issues defensively. There was, Jabari was really struggling, I'd say, those first 10 to 20 games of the season, and being in the right spot, understanding where he needs to be. And so much so that, like, Jeff Green would finish some games when they were trying to win. But as the season got on, you've seen Jabari improve and become better at understanding where he needs to be, his defensive assignments, making less mistakes. And, of course, he shot, 37%, I believe?
36.3.
36.3, excuse me. 36.3, which is
we're not going to cheat him on that 0.3. We'll give it to him.
Let's give it to him, man, because it was an improvement. And I think his numbers kind of got dragged down by the end of the season, because everybody was kind of struggling, kind of dragging through that last part of the season. But Jabari was a great release valve. He did all the things that we wanted to see him. He incrementally improved, and it all kind of accumulated into a kind of a mini leap for him, and where he was a serviceable player. And if he continues on that trajectory, we're going to get a really, really elite player, a guy that's going to live up to that number 3 pick.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of the stuff in today's episode, talking about kind of what is Jabari's ideal role on the basketball floor, right? Last season, we saw him play, obviously, a majority of his minutes at that 4 spot right next to, Alperen and Sengun in the front court. But then, obviously, when Sengun did go down due to injury, we saw Jabari slide over and become that starting 5, that stretch 5, for the final, quarter or so of the Rockets season. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, getting into kind of, where he could be best utilized by this team moving forward, and kind of what that would look like if Jabari were to, take on a bigger role, a more increased role. I think that we could be in store, and we mentioned this in our previous episode, if you saw our likely breakout candidates episode, talking about the fact that Jabari seems like he is poised for, a true breakout season here, right? We talk about the improvements from year 1 to year 2, but looking at just the statistical numbers, right? I mean, if he continues to trend up as a 3-point shooter, and then depending on what the Rockets actually envision for him offensively, that's going to be kind of the big one. Is I do think there is a lot of room for him to grow and to take on a bigger role, especially on the offensive end of the floor. It's all about what the Rockets and ultimately what Ime Udoka's vision for this team is, because if the vision is to continue to lean heavily into Alperen Sengun or even the Jalen Green Alperen Sengun 2-man game, then I mean, how much more opportunity is there for a guy like Jabari to really flourish offensively, to spread his wings and really kind of, embrace and take on, more of an offensive, load or to, increase his usage? Probably not much runway, right? Because you're going to have, Sengun getting 20 something attempts a game, Jalen getting 20 something attempts a night. Like, it's just, there's only so many shot attempts to go around, right? And Fred VanVleet's still a guy who's got to get his attempts in. You've got plenty of mouths to feed on this Rockets team, but I still maintain and think that in the right environment with the right setup, Jabari could be a great piece to this team. And again, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface for him as far as his offensive potential is concerned.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, Jabari, like we said, improved in his 3-point shooting, but he also showed flashes of some shot creation this year. I mean, I really like some of the stuff that he did in flashes as a mid-post operator, understanding where his spots are, how to get to those spots and make shots over the outstretched arms of defenders. I really like that. And as Jabari gradually gets better as a 3-point shooter, I think that will open up the offense even more. And then we'll be able to do, like we said, Ime Udoka will be able to mix in some misdirection screens and down screens to actually get Jabari open for 3-pointers or curve into pick and rolls into the mid post and actually get him some actions that's disguised in the Jalen Alp pick and roll. A lot of times you have the 2 bigs switch and screen for each other. Well, they before an action stops at the top of the key. And so some of those things can be disguised for a down screen where Jabari pops out and get an open 3 just to keep the defensive honest and get Jabari into rhythm. So as he it continues to be more consistent, he gets up to 38-39% from 3 on decent volume. Then I think Ime will start to add those wrinkles into the offense to make the defense honest, keep the defense honest, and open up the offense for all the players, honestly.
We do know one thing about this past season too was Ime was very upfront, very transparent about the fact that he was keeping the offense kind of vanilla for the most part, and that tracks with most of the season, right? Is he was so focused on ironing out all the deficiencies across the board, the turnovers, the transition defense, all that stuff. The Rockets really didn't experiment too much offensively. They didn't start picking up the pace and getting up more threes until like the latter 1/3 or so of the season, basically post All-Star break. And even then, a lot of the offensive sets were pretty basic in principle. So I do hope that this next season we will see more of those wrinkles, and hopefully it means more opportunities afforded for a guy like Jabari Smith Jr. to really spread his wings and fly offensively. Coming up, we want to get into what is Jabari's ideal role, though, on a basketball floor. What could his ideal role be with this Houston Rockets team? What could we see out of him moving forward, as well as what do we need to see next from him? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, it's just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So head on over to FanDuel.com. Take a look at some of the wagers that they have, like who's going to win the NBA Finals or the NBA Cup, or go take a look at the season awards. And finally, the outright betting favorite for Rookie of the Year, Reed Shepherd, plus 600. Wager just $5 on that, right? And then you can get yourself NFL Sunday Ticket for 3 weeks free. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison. So when we look at Jabari Smith Jr., right, he's a guy that has played most of his career at the 4 spot. He's played a little bit at the 3 from this past season, right? There were a few, games here and there, a few lineups here and there where, Ime went a little bit bigger and would basically have what you could look at as, understand, okay, well, maybe Jabari's at the 3 in this lineup, that kind of thing. So he's, effectively a wing for most of his career. And then we also saw him play situationally, some small ball 5 throughout the season. And then also taking over as the starting 5 once Alperen and Sengun went down due to injury. And then you start to look at his actual skill set, right? Where has he been the most effective throughout his career? And you start to look at him, operating in the mid-post area or with his back to the basket. And you start to get this kind of idea where you're like, man, when Jabari was drafted, we thought, man, he's going to be this jumbo-sized wing, 3-and-D, whatever. And then it starts to beg the question, like, is he best served maybe in that, 4-5 tweener role? Obviously, he still needs to bulk up, still needs to add more mass, but it really starts to make you think, what is his best role? What is his ideal future role as an NBA player? And I'm not completely sold on the idea of him being a wing full-time at the NBA level.
Yeah, I mean, I was never sold on that all the way back to scouting him in the draft. A lot of people wanted to make him a wing and utilize his great shooting and ability to shoot over the top of guys, when his actual skill set is that he has guard skills at a forward's positional size, which he can use that to his advantage against other forwards, bringing them out of the paint where he can really make them uncomfortable and take them off the dribble as well as shoot. Because, forwards don't really want to come out there on you and give up that paint positioning. And so I think that's where Jabari will thrive. And I think that's his position at the 4-5 position. And he has ample size for that. I mean, I'm pretty sure Jabari's scratching 7 foot. And right now, I think some of his limitations and weaknesses, some of the things that we want him to get better at, really stems from strength, right? I think once Jabari actually puts on some real muscle, some real bulk, we don't want him to get too bulky because he's such a versatile defender and he's able to switch out onto guards and onto wings, right? And so we don't want him to get bulky. We just want him to get stronger in the way that like Kevin Garnett was very strong, right? He kept his slender build. And that's one of the things that when we talk about how do we envision Jabari? Well, I envision him to be the type of defender that Kevin Garnett was for the Minnesota Timberwolves, for the Boston Celtics, the type of defender that Chris Bosh was. Now, his motor doesn't run as hot as Chris Bosh and a Kevin Garnett, but I think if he starts to add the toughness, and that comes with strength. There's some toughness in Jabari. It's always been there, and we've yet to really see it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, we saw flashes of it, little pockets of it last season.
And he has that fire. You know what I mean? Like I know it's deep down. I think once he puts on the strength, once he feels like he belongs in this league, like he's a vet guy, and he stopped taking bull. You know what I mean? And I like to see him really bring that anger, that strength, that defensive anchor mentality to this team. That's when I think Jabari is going to blossom as our third star.
Third star. Okay, I like the argument for third star. For me, when I start looking at him, even less so defensively, right? Because we know that he is incredibly versatile in the defensive end. I agree with you. I think there's one kind of glaring weakness, and that is the strength issue. And it was even more evident last season when he got promoted to the 5 full time, because then you saw some moments, some matchups where you're like, okay, Jabari is getting outclassed by some bigger bigs, right? By some legitimate bigs in the association, and that's okay, right? At the end of the day, he still needs to bulk up a little bit more, but he needs to retain the lateral quickness, the speed to be able to stay out there on the wing. The real question for me is, you start looking at this team and the way things are built right now, and at least when he was drafted, I thought to myself, like, man, like Jabari, perfect complement for Alperen Sengun is like the 4-5 combo of the future for the Rockets. I don't know if that is the perfect complement, because I feel like, and this might be a reach or something, but I feel like maybe neither of them is ever going to be able to fully maximize their own potential, like sharing the front court with each other, right? Because if Jabari is so lethal from the mid-range, from the mid-post area of the floor, putting his back to the basket, or like we already talked about, right, when he's playing the 5 and then other 5s are kind of out of position when they're having to guard him, either by dragging him out to the perimeter or him being able to put the ball on the floor. And even though he's not, the best at attacking a closeout, he doesn't have like the craftiest handle or anything, you don't need that when you're attacking another big who is positionally at a disadvantage, because you're really more of like that 4-5 tweener. So when I start thinking about how Jabari and Sengun complement each other, it's almost a disservice to Jabari, because the way that Sengun plays, it almost requires Jabari to just sit on the perimeter and be that catch and shoot outlet, right? Which he's capable of doing. But I think last year also really showed us, and going all the way back to his rookie season, Jabari Smith Jr. is very much a rhythm guy as well, right? Like, he wants to touch the ball. He wants to feel it a little bit. There's a reason that he shot so well at Auburn, because he was featured in the offense, right? He got his touches from the spots on the floor that he wanted to be at, right? And so that's why he looked like much more of a comfortable offensive player at Auburn, whereas in the NBA, when you go multiple possessions without touching the ball, and or you're only getting spot up opportunities, it's a very different dynamic to have to play through.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But that is a problem, I think, for Ime Udoka to solve. And that's what we're talking about, really, integrating these guys into the offense holistically, and having a read and react, having your offense start into read and react. And I honestly still think Jabari is an excellent offensive fit next to Alperen Sengun. Now, of course, he's not going to be in every initial action as a screener. And that is what you're talking about. You're taking him out of the initial actions, which may stymie his offensive development. But there are other ways that I feel like Jabari can keep himself in rhythm. And other ways for Ime Udoka, like I talked about, the down screens, just making sure you get 2 or 3 of them for Jabari a quarter. When Alperen Sengun is off the court, making sure you run the screen and rolls with Jabari then, right? The pick and pops for Jabari. Because we've seen at the end of the season that Jabari was very effective in the pick and pop, and he also could make some plays out of the mid range in the mid post, where he can either shoot that easy free throw line jumper or make a play for someone else. And so I think there are opportunities for him to get into rhythm. But most importantly, I think he's been developing as an off ball player very well. I think Jabari has shown that he's a very capable cutter, especially off Alperen Sengun. I actually think that those guys have a nice little connection there as the backside, weak side cutter, as well as, he's always going to get found for the open three. That
is one area, the connection, kind of the big to big actions between Sengun and Jabari, where I would love, like we're talked about the offensive creativity a little bit earlier, right? I would love to see, and this is going to be kind of a big question mark for, not just for Jabari and kind of what his, offensive ceiling looks like this upcoming season, but also for Ime Udoka and just how creative he can get as a head coach, is, can you find ways to maximize the spacing between Sengun? Let's pretend Sengun still can't shoot the 3 ball this next season, right? Like, still struggles from outside. But can you find ways to have Sengun and Jabari occupy that mid-post area, that paint area, and have some big-to-big actions going on to where those two guys can feed? Because even going back to Jabari's rookie season, we saw a little bit of chemistry between those two guys, to where you thought, man, like, okay, there's some moments between these two guys where they can figure something out. We just haven't seen it on a consistent enough basis.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's on everybody. That's on Alperen Sengun as well, to become a more all-around player, to add some shooting to his game so he can play off ball as well. It's on Ime Udoka to scheme up better offense to keep everybody involved. It's on everybody to be more efficient so the ball can move around in that way. And it's also on Jabari to also improve as a screen setter so that he can create space for his teammates and be in those actions more. Because although Jabari has gotten better, I think it's still a lot of room for improvement for Jabari in that area as a screen setter.
Yeah, at this point, we got to get into what we want to see next from Jabari Smith Jr. this upcoming season, kind of what some of our expectations are for him going into year 3. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison alluded to Jabari Smith Jr. growing into that third star role for this Houston Rockets team. I want to get into what do we think his role looks like this next season? Like, well, like when we fast forward and we get to the end of the season, whether, you know, when we have the championship parade coming down Polk Street or Richmond, whatever direction it goes, I guess it's got to go down Richmond. Kidding. They're not going to win the title this year. I'm sorry, guys. Spoiler alert. But whatever happens this next season, right? First round, play-in tournament, what have you. When we look back, what do we think the best version of Jabari Smith Jr. has looked like for this team? Like, if we could map out a successful season for Jabari this year, what does it look like?
I think it is a more perfected version of the role that he played this year. Where maybe we can add some more offensive actions, open the offense up a little bit more for him. But ultimately, where I really want to see improvement from Jabari Smith Jr. is I want him to become the anchor of this defense. And I think it is a mentality issue. We talk about strength so much, but a lot of strength is also, once you've added enough muscle, you have to have the mentality to move guys out of the way. You have to have the motor to do those things. And I think that's what I want to see from him. I want to see him come in with leadership as a defender. I want him to take ownership over this team as its defensive anchor. And I want him to take it personal every night. I want him to go out there and get average 10 to 11 rebounds a night. I want him to go out there and take on the tough assignments. And I think sometimes you can tell when Jabari's locked in defensively and when he's kind of, not as locked in. There was a game with the Clippers where Kawhi Leonard hit like 3 mid-rangers in his face just because he wasn't applying enough pressure as a defender. That is a mental weakness. That is not indicative of his ability. And so it's up to Jabari to be locked in every night and take ownership of this team defensively. And that's what I want to see from him. That's when I think we'll get the best Jabari, when he becomes this team's defensive anchor and really takes that ownership. When you add that with an improved 3-point shot, I think Jabari will effectively be this team's third star, because that's what this team is missing. When Dillon Brooks is no longer on this team, who is going to be and Fred VanVleet, who is going to set the tone for us defensively? It's going to be Thompson. It's going to be Jabari Smith, and he has to come with it.
I like the idea of him being the defensive anchor. I do have my concerns, not necessarily because of all the physical tools are there. I just wonder though, we've looked at it before, and I think the comp that we used to draw up for Jabari is, man, like if he could be like Triple J one day, like that would be insane. And I think a lot of the physicals are similar. We have not seen anywhere near, I think, the level of rim protection that we would need out of Jabari to be anywhere in the same stratosphere as Triple J yet.
No. So his rim protection is not going to be like in block shots in that manner. It's going to be positionally. It's going to be on time positional defense. I mean, think of how Draymond Green kind of anchors the Warriors defense, right? Kevon Looney also. You know what I mean? These guys are not racking up a bunch of blocks, but they're on time. They're tough. You get one shot and we rebound. They understand what the team needs and what the offense is trying to do, and they step up to the plate and they have determination with that. They know they're going to make those plays, and we've seen some flashes out of that. That DeMar DeRozan one-on-one defense we talked about in a previous episode, where he really steps up to the challenge, right? I think when he steps up to the challenge, when he's locked in, he does have the ability to do that. It's about being consistent with that. Well, right now, Jabari is good at a lot of things, but he's not elite at anything. And in order for you to stay as the starter on this team, you're going to have to start adding some elite skills to your repertoire. And defense is one of the things that I think he can. He just has to bring it every night.
Do you think, well, on that note, right, I feel like there's still a world for certain certain starters in the NBA to be very good at a lot of things rather than having like, a couple of elite skills necessarily, but for Jabari to blossom into what we hope is a star level player, I fully agree, right? He's going to have to pick up one or two elite skills, and that could be could be defensively, could be the anchor thing. It could be another uptick in his 3-point shooting, right? Yep. A lot of people after his rookie season, man, where he shot 30% from the 3-point line, man, a lot of people were going back to the Auburn numbers, and they sold the Jabari stock. And you know what? Those of us from the Jabari jungle, the OGs who were happy that he fell to number 3, never sold stock, never wavered. He hit 36.3 this past season, and I'm calling it. Look, I am going to call it right now, Madison.
I'm listening.
Calling it right now. 39% this next season.
On how many attempts?
Let me see how many attempts per game he had this past season. I want to make sure I don't
he should be able to get
that.
4 up a game.
He was at 5 attempts per game this past year. I'm gonna say 39% on 6.5 attempts a game. I'm going 39% on 6.5 attempts.
Hey, if he does that, it's going to be curtains.
Some of my reasoning for that, right? He had the 5 attempts last year, and going up a whole, attempt and a half is a lot. He 4.9 attempts his rookie season, 5 attempts his, sophomore campaign. I think a big part of it is going to be the Rockets are going to come out of the gate playing a lot faster. I fully expect, right? Like they played with training wheels on for 2/3 of last season until the All-Star break, basically. I fully expect them to come out just running and gunning a lot sooner and a lot quicker, playing to some of the strengths of the younger guys on the roster rather than intentionally slowing things down. I think that in and of itself will afford more opportunities, more 3-point, opportunities for Jabari. This is still an organization that analytically prides itself on prioritizing the best shots, quote unquote, in basketball, right? And the 3-point shot is one of the is the best analytic shot in the game, or one of them, right? Dunks, layups, free throws, all that stuff. So I fully expect that to be the case. I'm calling it right now, 39%, 6.5 attempts per game. That said, on your note about him locking in, right? I don't think it's just a defensive thing. And I think this is going to be one big area that I want to see from him is that locking in thing also applies to, you can look back at moments from last year, right? Think about like the missed free throws that cost them some games, like go all the way early on to the game against the Spurs. Jabari has whatever you want to call it, that like X factor, right? He has that clutch gene. We've seen him hit some insanely huge shots in his career. Think about the shot against the Pelicans. Think about going all the way back against the Pacers. Like all these different big time threes late in the game, late clock situations where you're thinking, oh my God, how did he hit this shot, right? He's got the chops to do that, but there's also moments where you need to see him lock in. I think the free throw shooting is like a mental thing, right? That, for a guy who is an 81% free throw shooter, right? You have no business missing 2 free throws in a game where you could have sealed it with just 1 make. Like, it might be nitpicky to highlight that, but the fact that it happened not once but multiple times last season, it's worth noting that that's an area of his game that, whether it's, I don't want to call it, not being mentally tough, whatever, it's just one of those things that he's got to figure out, and that's going to be something that I want to see him take the step forward in, this next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think mental is coming across as something that we're talking about a lot for Jabari Smith. And we know his struggles have mentally been a challenge for him. He's been honest about him. He asked Jason Tatum in the interview, what advice would you give a young player who hasn't lived up to their potential? And
we know it too. I mean, John Lucas, told me straight up one day at before a Rockets game where he was just telling me that Jabari is so tough on himself. Like he basically said he's a perfectionist, right? So when things stop going his way or when things aren't going the way that he thinks they're supposed to go, not like, when the going gets tough, he takes his ball and go home or anything. Not like that, but just he expects the best out of himself. He expects perfection from himself with his work ethic, with his drive, all that. And so then when it's not working out that way, he's extra hard on himself, and it's hard for him to sometimes not get down on himself and beat himself up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely a maturity thing. That's about growing up and being a man, right? He's going through those emotions as a young man, trying to live in his purpose. And I think with maturity, because we know he has, the cojones factor, right? We know he has that deep down. He just wants it so bad right now. He's kind of in his head. But as he matures and grows up, I think it won't be a problem for him. And that's what I'm hoping to see next season. As he gets more years under his belt, these things will become second nature, and it won't be so much in his head anymore. The regular season is, I've done this a million times. He's no longer going to be in his head, and that's the maturity I think that's coming with his game, and that's what we want to see next year.
And when you talk about that defensive anchor angle too, it's still worth noting. I mean, going all the way back to his rookie season, going all the way back to Summer League, right? Jabari is an incredibly vocal defender, right? He calls stuff out constantly. He's constantly trying to communicate on defense, and he has no qualms about the leadership angle of things. So I think that when you brought that up, I think it makes perfect sense. I would love to see Jabari Smith Jr. embrace and become the defensive anchor of this Rockets team. And now that this is year 2 with Ime Udoka and largely the exact same team coming back, right? There's no learning curve now. There's not, okay, let me get to know Fred and Dillon and let me figure out what Ime's expectations are. It's year 2. Everybody knows what their job is. Everybody knows what their role is. And in fact, I'm sure that this could be the year where Ime then extends that, more responsibility to Jabari. Hey, I want to empower you. I want you to feel like you're the voice of this defense. I want you to feel like you're the quarterback of this defense. Because Dillon Brooks might be the edge. He might be, the point of attack defender, take the toughest defensive assignment. But guess what? You're our free safety, right? You're our backline defender. You're the guy that sees the whole floor. You need to be communicating with everybody. Hey, move here, switch here. You're the guy blowing up different actions because that's your role on the floor, whereas Dillon has to take the toughest defensive assignment. So I'm excited for year 3 Jabari, man. I think we're poised for a big season from him.
Yeah, man, I really hope so. I'm really excited as well with him. I know a lot is made about Jalen Green's season coming up, but I think Jabari is on the cusp of something great just in the way that Jalen is. He may not reach that heights, but I wouldn't count him out. Like, I would not count Jabari out from, really becoming one of these teams' solidified best players and earning that extension after this year.
We want to know your thoughts. What are your expectations for Jabari Smith Jr.'s 3rd year in the NBA? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Madison, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Find me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
But that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.